Can I be real with you? I do not like Zeus. Nah, not one bit. A large reason for this is because Zeus got away with everything. He faced nearly no repercussion or consequence for his actions. While he had enemies and was faced with some battles, he conquered them all and further cemented his place as the ruler of the gods, the keeper of order. And that makes me pissed. But looking beyond my personal issues with Zeus, it got me thinking, what makes Zeus so special despite his overwhelming flaws? I got curious to find out what makes Zeus such an enigma, why he was such a compelling character who somehow had the ability to elicit strong reactions from even the most tranquil observer. And so, in today's episode of Mysteries and Myths, we are going to dissect and inspect the psychology of Zeus. Oh, before we get into the head of Zeus, if you are yet to, please subscribe to the channel. It goes a long way in helping the channel. Plus, it's a nice way to show your support for what we do. Thank you. Now let's dive in. When it comes to Zeus, there are various talking points, but there's no denying that he is a complex and complicated character. I mean, this dude hated the fact that Prometheus stole fire and gave it to humans to advance their civilization, so he condemned Prometheus to a cycle of torment. But this same Zeus had no qualms sleeping with mortal women. And like I said, he always got away with it. In fact, it was considered an honor for a woman to bear a child for Zeus, because then that child would have the blood of Zeus. Having a divine blood in your lineage was a blessing, regardless of how that blood came to be. And Zeus did quite a number of blessings. A major theme in Zeus's life which sparks controversies is his sexual promiscuity. On one occasion, he told the sun not to shine for 3 days, disguised himself as the husband of a queen who was returning from war, and ravaged her for 3 days straight. And do you know the sick part? After doing the deed, Zeus allowed the real husband of the queen to also have his turn with her on the same night, right after he had finished. Even for a Greek god, that was sick and twisted. Speaking of sick and twisted, there was one time when Zeus noticed a king had lustful intent towards his wife Hera. So he used a cloud to recreate the figure and feel of Hera and placed this lifelike version of his wife on the king's bed. The king thought it was Hera herself, and then, from wherever he was, Zeus watched the king ravage with his wife. A cloud form of his wife, but that doesn't make it any less obscene. To be honest, I think he kind of liked it. But when the king went and told his friends that he slept with the wife of Zeus, Zeus got mad about it and condemned him to eternal punishment, which I think is a valid reaction, but then again, you were the one who created the circumstances you are now punishing. I mean, pick a side, bro. Zeus was the kind of guy who could mess with you for the fun of it, but would get mad if you tried to mess with him. Like that one guy in the friend group who would allow a self-humiliating joke, but would get mad if an outsider laughed. Despite the rottenness of Zeus and his proclivities, all Greek texts describe him along the line of the greatest of all gods, the most just god, the wise Zeus. I mean, come on, y'all need to stop glazing the guy. He already has an ego the size of Mount Olympus. On one hand, Zeus was a righteous judge, at least for the most part. On the other hand, he himself was above judgment and answered to no one. But although Zeus was promiscuous, he was not a coward. No. On the contrary, he was brave and heroic. When Olympus was besieged by the monster Typhon, while other gods ran away, Zeus remained and faced Typhon head-on, even when he knew he might die. And he almost did die, but he was saved by Hermes. And then, what did Zeus do? He recovered his strength and went again for round 2. This time, he won.
In each account of Greek mythology, whenever the existence of the gods was threatened or his rulership was tested, Zeus always rose to the occasion.
So, what does this psychology of Zeus reveal? Let's start with his childhood. As the last-born child of the Titan king Kronos, Zeus grew up away from his father and mother. From a young age, he had one purpose: to defeat his father. Everyone and everything around him reminded him that his father was this bad guy who needed to be stopped. Oh, make no mistakes, from various angles, Kronos was a villain. But was it right to burden a young child with the task of destroying his father's legacy? Everyone around Zeus filled his head with rage for his father. A sense of justice and righteous payback was attached to this. But no one stopped to wonder what the boy himself wanted. No one asked for his aspirations, untainted by the whispers of past grievances that were fed into his heart.
Zeus had an abnormal childhood. One could say he had no childhood at all. He grew up with no friends, no brothers, no sisters, no father or mother. The guardians who raised him treated him like a master, while his grandmother rumbled on about defeating his father and how much of a righteous deed it was. Perhaps because Zeus had a terrible childhood, he was extra lenient on his children. He let them live their lives, find themselves, and grow into their own person. In that regard, you could say that Zeus was a good father, again, by Greek god standards.
The first part of Zeus's life revolved around defeating his father and freeing his siblings. After achieving that, he suddenly became the king of the gods. You know that feeling when you obsess over one thing for so long that when you eventually get it, you don't know what to do anymore? That was the same feeling Zeus had after becoming king. The only difference was that for Zeus, this feeling was amplified several folds. But Zeus did not crumble. No, not yet. For in his conquest against Kronos, Zeus had met a Titaness named Medes, and he loved her. Although Zeus forced himself on her, which is quite typical of him, Medes came around and they both got married. Oddly enough, they were happy, which is not something you'd expect from your typical Greek mythology marriage. However, with this bliss came a tragedy. The newlyweds received a prophecy that the son of Medes would overthrow his father. This prophecy unlocked a fear that was hidden deep in the recesses of Zeus's mind, a fear that he would lose the throne, the one thing he had obsessed about all his life. Driven to despair and left with no reasonable choice, Zeus did the unreasonable. He swallowed his wife. It was the loss of his first love that finally broke Zeus. The tragic fate of not being with the one he loved added to his already severe psychological problems. And the fragile tether that was keeping Zeus together finally fell. All that was left was a king who had all the power, but had no joy, no passion, just drifting along with a void in his heart. To numb this existential crisis, Zeus sought some sick kind of comfort in the arms and legs of many women. It sure as hell didn't help that he was king and could get away with whatever he wanted.
Truth be told, if you were to examine by today's standards, Zeus was not a great leader. Hell, you might even say he was a terrible leader. However, one thing Zeus always had was a brave heart, a heart of courage. When the gods were confronted by Typhon, he allowed every Olympian god flee to safety, while he risked his life to fight Typhon alone. When Poseidon charged Ares for the murder of his son, who, by the way, had forced himself on Ares' daughter, Zeus understood the pain both fathers felt, one for the assault of his daughter and the other for the murder of his son. Zeus empathized with both gods, but he declared Ares free. It was in times like these, times of bravery, selflessness, empathy, it was in times like these that Zeus proved himself as a true king. Even to the mortals, Zeus was kind of a fair god, not like they were left with a lot of better options. Although Zeus initially didn't want mortals to grow a civilization, he eventually warmed up to the mortal world. He helped heroes, which, for the most parts, were either his demigod children, grandchildren, or some other family member. He guided kings, and yes, he blessed various of their wives or daughters with his divine oaths. In his dealing with mortals, he was often magnanimous, allowing mortals to act freely as they chose, but punishing them if they went overboard. So, not too free, unless the whole God thing would be pointless. But his judgments were usually fair. Again, by Greek god standards. Perhaps his fair judgment was why he was referred to as the wisest of all. However, Zeus did not grow wise and great overnight. He may have been born powerful, but it was through the tribulations he faced, the courage and fearlessness he showed. It was through the choices he made that Zeus won the hearts and worship of all. Zeus learned to overcome his trauma, deal with his demons, and face his role as king with wisdom and courage. This is why Zeus feels so enigmatic. Because of all the gods, he was the most real. He was true to his desires, acted on his whims, but beyond that, he grew and learned that a leader needed to be just, fair, and wise.
The Psychology of Zeus shows us a brave, powerful, but troubled young boy who won himself the highest seat in the world but lacked direction for his life and his leadership. The boy would only become a man when he overcomes his demons, his losses, and his traumas. And this man would only become a great leader when he learns empathy and wise judgment. This is the magic of Zeus. To be willing to grow, to evolve, the courage to face your fears, not just for yourself, but for those who look up to you, and to learn, grow, evolve into the greatness that was always yours. Now, I pose to you a question. If you were an immortal ruler with all the power in the world, but with heart demons and no direction of what to do, would you have done better than Zeus? And with that, we close today's episode of Mysteries and Myths. I'll see you in our next adventure.